Welcome to Vintage SF News. I'm your reporter, Rick Deckard. News item. There have been many live streams on this channel before, but we've had two very interesting ones in the last week. First, author Robert J. Sawyer joined Richard in a lively conversation about his work and about his latest novels, including two books that haven't been released yet, but he started to talk about them, gave him the dirt. And then, looking forward into the summer, there was the Rocket Summer 2026 launch. Rocket Summer is an event created by Michael K. Vaughan. There were noted telecasters such as Scott of the Wild Digest, Randy, the Literate Texan, Greg of Another Bibliophile Reads, Gavin of Genre Books, Gareth from Books, Songs, and Other Magic, and then our reporter, Richard Rempel of vintagesf. Coming up, Richard's going to be joining Jake of Pulp Mortem and Andreea of Infinite Text to look at that smash TV series, The Twilight Zone. They'll be looking at a short story from Charles Beaumont. This live telecast is scheduled for June 30th. Check the link in our description for the time in your area. News item. The next telecast of Vintage SF will feature books acquired over the last month of June. Our reporter Richard is going to take a look at both old and new books that came into the library of the future. There'll be a book review coming up as well, The Chronoliths by Robert Charles Wilson. It should be a dandy week next week. Then we're into July, and July, as I've said, is Rocket Summer. The first week, Richard is going to be taking a look at short stories from the 1930s. The following week, from the 1940s. The third week, from the 1950s, and guess what? From the 1960s. Not only looking at short stories, but looking at Clifford D. Simak's The Goblin Reservation. I'm not sure if that sounds more like horror than science fiction. Late breaking news, a buddy read. Iain M. Banks' Feersum Endjin. I'm reading it along with Bart of Bart's Bookspace, Whitney of Secret Sauce of Storycraft, and Sam of Sam Not So Wise. And at the end of the month, Richard will be off to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for Pulp Fest. He expects to meet many of his luminary reporter friends. It should be a riveting month of vintage SF. And now, a special treat. We have not one, but two reviews by our reporter, Richard. Take it away, Richard. Thank you, Rick. And here we have two novels from the 1970s, the mid-1970s. We have Ice and Iron by Wilson Tucker from 1974 and Cecilia Holland's Floating Worlds from 1976. What do these two have in common besides being published in the mid-1970s? Well, there's also the battle of the sexes. We have societies built patriarchal and matriarchal within these two novels. You might be surprised that the matriarchal society we're going to talk about is from Wilson Tucker. Wilson Tucker was well known for writing time travel type novels, and The Year of the Quiet Sun might be his most famous, along with The Lincoln Hunters. In this novel, we take a look at two storylines, Ice and Iron. The ice is the Ice Age. There's a glacial progression coming down Canada towards the United States. Now, I think we should talk just briefly about Lake Agassiz. Glacial Lake Agassiz was a massive prehistoric lake that covered parts of central North America, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, North Dakota, and Minnesota. Fed by melting glaciers from the last ice age, it was larger than all of today's Great Lakes combined at its peak, and left behind fertile plains and modern lakes. So when we talk about the glaciation happening here, we have a reoccurrence of the glaciers that eventually created Lake Agassiz some 15,000 years ago. So as this new glacier ice age is approaching, it's covering that same territory. And we have at the base of these glaciers Scientists discover there's debris, even human bodies, that are appearing, but they're not appearing from the ground that's being pushed. They're actually floating down from the sky. These appearances seem to be a connection, but is it a connection to the past or the future? The novel itself has a braided storyline. We have alternating chapters, one for ice, which would be close to the modern times here with an ice age approaching. And then we have the iron. And we find that this comes from an age where there's primitive man, but there's also advanced women. And this woman's society has weapons and technology beyond what we know today. So how do these two times connect? Are these men that are appearing, and eventually one woman, are they coming down because they are floating down a lake in time travel to the bottom of our glacier? Interesting concepts, an interesting matriarchal society, but it's a really brief book and we really don't get into it in depth. We end up with two storylines that don't have a satisfying connection really at the end. It's like he had this concept but really didn't know exactly where to go with it. It's a bit of a slice of life from both ends. I think what he was doing here, though, is he was fascinated by the glaciers that came across North America previously and the lake that was formed, and he thought of a way to try to connect those ideas. But is the Lake Agassiz connection here from the past or the future? On the other hand, we have a patriarchal society here in Floating Worlds. This is a solar system well into the future. By the way, in both of these novels, we're dealing also with climate fiction. We have a glacier approaching the northern United States, devastating Canada. And in this one here, the Earth is a mess. It really can't sustain itself climate-wise, and people are living in domes and enclosed areas. It's affected the government, and the government really is a type of anarchy. There's also different governing type models on the moon or on Mars. And there's a race of mutants, people who've been left out in the outer solar system in Saturn and Uranus, people who were called the Stith. And they are a warrior patriarchal society. In some ways, at first they reminded me of Klingons in Star Trek. But really, this is about Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, at least that's what I think. Instead of looking at it in history, I think we're looking at it in fiction form. And it's really interesting because we have a female agent of Earth who has been imprisoned at one point with some Stith, knows their language, and then is recruited as an agent for Earth to infiltrate the Stith Empire. And we get a long 17-year history of that connection. And that connection goes into becoming part of them, becoming part of families, and actually having a son. Now, as some historical novels play out, you have events and things that happen, and then they continue to build and build. But there's no real conclusion because it's history. History doesn't really conclude. And so does this novel. It's like a thick slice of life of these empires and of these characters. My friend Stephen E. Andrews of The Outlaw Bookseller goes into this in detail and especially examines the political structures in here. So, what are my recommendations for these two? Well, I think that Ice and Iron really kind of is that older vintage type novel. It has a great concept, but it really doesn't go too far with it. We just sort of discover what the mystery is about, but I don't think there's any sort of satisfying conclusion to it. And it's a quick read at about 180 pages. This one is over 600 pages. Cecilia Holland is a much better writer. I think that you'll find her prose very interesting and the political structure fascinating. This is a harsh tale, though. There's no muting what the Stith are capable of, and the relationships and the warring and the tragedies that happen. So I would say it's a much more mature novel. I would give Ice and Iron maybe a 5 out of 10. Interesting idea, but that's about it. I think it's a lesser known and perhaps not as popular Wilson Tucker novel. This one, the one-off only science fiction novel from Holland, is complex, mature, packs a punch, and is very interesting politically. I would give it a solid 7.5. Let's make it 8 out of 10. All right, that's it from the reviews from the future. Back to you, Rick. Thank you, Richard. And that's the way it will be in the future. Until then, keep reading.